Hello and welcome to Strat News Global. I'm Surya Gangadharan. The so-called Abraham Accords, the agreement between the UAE and Israel, has created quite a flutter in the Arab world. Although there are indications that some other Arab countries may be ready to follow suit. Among them, Bahrain and Oman, perhaps even Sudan. These are the names being reported in the media. I have with me Mr. Talmiz Ahmed, India's former ambassador to the UAE and to Saudi Arabia, and a scholar on West Asian developments. Sir, what's your take on this? Do you expect Bahrain to follow suit? Oman too? I mean, what are their motivations?
Let us go back a little bit. UAE and Israel have been in touch with each other for more than 20 years.
Yeah.
And more recently, Saudi Arabia and Bahrain have also been in contact. They were brought together by their shared concerns relating to the nuclear agreement with Iran that the Obama administration had initiated and finally saw through. So, a kind of partnership, you could call it a strategic partnership, has already been in place now for at least 5 years. The significant point to be noted is not whether they are in touch with each other and share intelligence and are seeking to work with each other, but the dramatic announcement of establishing diplomatic relations. I think that is the crucial point. Your specific question to me is whether Bahrain and Oman are likely to follow suit. Very likely. The point to be noted here is that the Palestine issue has not resonated with Arab governments since 1967. 1967 was the first joint effort of Arab countries to redress the injustice done to the Palestinians. With the Arab defeat in 1967, it is no longer a cause for the Arab governments. It still resonates with the Arab people, which is quite different. In the Gulf countries, you find that the regimes being authoritarian, they are able to manage public opinion quite effectively. The population base is very small, and with a combination of co-option and coercion, they are able to maintain a degree of consensus. Therefore, United Arab Emirates has no concern relating to domestic dissidents. Neither does Bahrain. Bahrain is an even smaller country, has been under pressure for some time. It is overwhelmingly dependent on Saudi Arabia for its sustenance. So I don't think Bahrain, there is no particular significance to Bahrain in this regard. Oman, yes. Oman has had a slightly different trajectory with regard to Arab affairs. It has not involved itself with Arab conflicts, but has tried to project itself as a country that wants to bring conflicts under control. Recall here that just a few years ago, Muscat was the venue for dialogue between Iran and the Americans, which finally led to the discussions on the nuclear agreement. So, Oman has always believed in broad stability in the region.
So, what about Sudan? I mean, again, it's one of those outlier countries.
See, Sudan has had a complex trajectory. It is today very much under the control of the Emiratis. Emirates had facilitated, there were popular agitations in the country relating to wanting reform. And that time Omar al-Bashir was overthrown. The UAE is believed to have played a major role in his ouster and also facilitated the agreement that has led to a kind of stability in that country. UAE maintains very strong influence in Sudan. Also, it has used Sudani mercenaries, you could say soldiers or mercenaries, in Yemen. As you know, UAE withdrew all its soldiers from Yemen and has been using Sudan. At one time, the Sudani contingent in Yemen was one of the largest in Yemen, in that country. And they've taken casualties as well.
And makes the numbers look more respectable.
The numbers will never be respectable. Let us be very clear. These are countries which are all authoritarian regimes. They have serious dissidents from their own community. No Arab, except a few co-opted by the regime. No Arab in the entire landscape from Morocco up to Yemen will support normalization of ties with the Israelis. Recall here, in 2002, an Arab peace initiative was approved by all the governments or all the Arab governments. What did it say? It merely stated that all Arab countries are ready for normal political, economic ties and diplomatic ties with Israel, provided it evacuates itself from all occupied territories. So the issues pertaining to the Palestinians were put on the table diplomatically. The Arabs have no animus. They have recognized the state of Israel. What they have not recognized, and indeed the international community has not recognized, is the occupation of the territories. So the occupied territories of West Bank and Gaza, that is the contention. So that is what the Arabs have always asked for, and that is what is a normal process. And there is therefore the United Nations proposal for a land for peace. That means you give land and you will have peace. Land for peace is precisely what everybody has been talking about. When we say that there is a need for a two-state solution, what are we saying? We are saying that the occupied territory should be released, a Palestinian state should be then put in its place, it should be sovereign, and it should be economically viable. It should be a dignified state. It should not be made up of a number of statelets like Bantustans that the South Africans had tried out in their time in the 1980s, which the international community has rejected. What is happening now is this bunch of Gulf countries have decided to abandon the Arab peace process, the Arab peace initiative, and to normalize ties with Israel without any of the conditions being fulfilled. This is their sovereign right. They have no popular resistance at home, and they feel that this serves their interest. So what we should be looking at with respect is what are the interests that are being served for the Emiratis and for all the other players in this drama. What interests are being served at this time for these countries to be opening up to the Israelis? They've already been in contact. They've already had very serious dialogue with each other and have attempted to put together a process that would bring the Americans on board against Iran. So there is already an ongoing cooperation. What was the background that led to this particular public announcement at this time is, to my mind, a much more interesting situation.
Is this the Iran issue?
No. Specific background relates to the annexation. That Netanyahu, as part of his election process, had announced to the Israeli people that I am going to annex 30% of the West Bank. That particular territory that is already occupied by the settlement. 600,000 Israelis are already living there. So annexation is a formality, but it is a kind of symbolic formality. People get emotional that I got my territory as part of my space instead of it being called occupied territory. It's a unilateral gesture. This failed. Now we have to locate why this annexation program failed. Annexation has been rejected by the international community as a whole, by the Europeans and by the Arabs, because annexation will be a deep-seated humiliation. It will escalate matters across, and the Palestinians will rise in revolt, and you will have the third intifada. So then the Americans have been talking to Netanyahu behind the scenes over the last month or so, trying to tell him, okay, if you go for annexation for 30% of the West Bank, you have to release formally 6.5% of the West Bank to the Palestinian Authority, which will become the nucleus of the Palestinian state. That Netanyahu was not willing to agree to, even 6.5%. Under the deal of the century, which Trump had announced, he gets 30%, but he has to start releasing land for the Palestinian state. The Palestinian state is an integral part of the deal of the century. Since Netanyahu was not interested in releasing any land for the Palestinians and creating a nucleus for a Palestinian state, which would also involve releasing territory that belongs to East Jerusalem. So he rejected the annexation idea. So Israel now telling us that we are no longer interested in annexation is neither here nor there. It has already been abandoned.
Anyway.
The UAE is so. My suggestion to you is as follows. The UAE has initiated this public process of formalizing ties to help two of its partners in regard to the immediate problems they are facing. These two partners are Donald Trump and Benjamin Netanyahu. Both of them are facing a very tough political scenario at home. Donald Trump is facing elections in 2 months plus.
Yeah.
He has nothing to show for the 4 years he has been there. He has no foreign policy achievement. His economy is in a shambles. And of course, he has grossly mishandled the pandemic. So he needs all the help he can get. So this is a way to give a gift to Donald Trump, a diplomatic achievement, which he can then tom-tom and say, what a great guy I am. He can actually show one particular achievement. Netanyahu. Netanyahu is at rock bottom today in Israel.
Yeah.
His economy is also in a shambles. Thousands of people have lost their businesses, and also 20% of the country is today unemployed. And you have massive demonstrations on the street week after week after week. And he has treated those demonstrators with contempt. And he has called them hard right-wing, anarchists, etc. His approval rating for the pandemic is 25% in the country. So what he is planning to do, that the situation for him can only go worse. He has been looking at an election. Break the coalition and go in for elections, which would happen as early as November, because after that, things will only get worse for him.
Yeah.
What the UAE has done is to give him a gift as well by this gesture. Today, when the man is beleaguered, the giving up on annexation is nothing. Nobody should take that seriously. And in fact, that plan can be revived at the drop of a hat.
Yeah.
What has happened is, what Netanyahu actually did and what Trump did in Washington, what Netanyahu did in Jerusalem, is to announce to the Israeli people, Netanyahu did, is what a great statesman I am. That without conceding anything to the Palestinians, I got a major Arab country to come on board. So this is the background, that the initiative of the Emiratis has nothing to do with Iran, because already the Americans are there. I mean,
Yeah.
what greater strength has this initiative done for the Emiratis? The Americans are there. They have the Armada, the Central Command. They have the Air Force. They have 80,000 soldiers. They have bases all around. And they have done the policy of maximum pressure through sanctions. What more are you going to do?
Yeah.
And there is no role in this for Israel. Israel, the relationship with Israel is bringing no advantage. No political advantage or strategic advantage to the Emiratis. What the Emirates is doing is basically boosting the stature of two of its beleaguered partners for a larger purpose. And if you don't mind, I will elaborate.
Yeah,
the
please.
larger purpose is this. The Emirates wants to be a major role player in the region. It's a small country. It has only its population, native population is only 12 to 15%, but its leaders have ambitions. They want to be larger than life. They want to play beyond their league. My own personal view is that Sheikh Mohammed bin Zayed has been inspired by the Qatari example. Qatar is an even smaller country,
Yeah.
but because of its financial resources, it became a larger than life player in regional affairs. Except that Qatar backs the Muslim Brotherhood. The Emirates now feels that it is well placed with all the assets it has, the financial assets, its support for moderate Islam, the fact that its oil revenues will continue for at least another century, to the extent the international community wants this. It has affiliated itself with technology, with finance, with leisure, with connectivity, logistic connectivity. It is therefore a very attractive player in the region. It wants to be a political and military player. In order to achieve this, Emirates has to have the Americans on their side. So what has the Emirates done? It has systematically carried out certain initiatives to subserve the US interests without directly involving the Americans. It has taken control of bases in the Red Sea as well as in the Indian Ocean in Yemen. So Mocha Aden, Mukalla in Yemen, and across the into the Horn of Africa, all across in Somalia, it has bases, and Eritrea, it has bases. So these are bases. This is how it has expanded its strategic outreach. What it has done, therefore, it needs the Americans on its side. What it wishes to do with this gesture is to, yes, boost the electoral prospects for Trump and Netanyahu, but the longer term vision is to ingratiate itself even more deeply with the pro Israel lobby in the United States. It is possibly the most influential role player in US politics. It is usually their agenda is on the hard right wing. Jewish opinion itself is very broad, but the lobbies that are there, the pro-Israel hard right, they tend to be from the hard right wing. They support annexation, they support the settlement, they support annexation, and to have UAE believes that if it can ingratiate itself with them, it has already done so. This is a further that UAE is now seen that in our bad times, when Netanyahu was at his lowest ebb and when Trump was at his lowest ebb, you came forward to us and you are this is a long term game. It goes beyond Trump and Netanyahu. They may win, they may not. This
Yeah.
particular initiative is not going to give them victory. But it is a long term vision of the Crown Prince Mohammed bin Zayed to be a strategic role player for which he crucially needs to be a partner of the United States. This is my understanding of what has happened just now.
So one can say that the Palestinians have been finally thrown under the bus.
Since 1967, the Palestinian issue, the Palestinian cause, has not been the cause of Arab governments. It has not been a cause for which Arab governments were willing to fight. It has become a political and diplomatic issue. Where the fight is concerned, fight for your rights is concerned, from 1967, this responsibility has been assumed by the Palestinians directly. So they have not been thrown under the bus. There is no bus on the horizon. They
Yeah.
have been agitating for their own rights themselves, taken a beating. But they have not given up. They have not compromised on their core demands. There was the first intifada, there's a second intifada. It is not as if they are looking at victory.
So India, where does India figure in all this?
I now no longer believe in this. I believe that the government of India, in its wisdom, has given up on playing any security role. It never acquired it seriously, let me say. So it's not a question of giving up, but now there is not even minimum interest in this regard. Because see, a kind of strategic initiative, a kind of initiative, that diplomatic initiative, requires you to have a vision.
Yeah.
And based on that vision, you must have a strategy. You must bring people together and say, this is what I'm going to do, and this is how I should do it. I have not seen either the vision or any interest in shaping a strategy on the part of Modi too. My own impression is that Modi too have decided to entirely focus on reshaping the domestic political order and have given up any serious interest in foreign affairs. So where does India figure in this? I would very sadly say to you, India doesn't figure in any of this. We have a very robust relationship with each of the countries individually. Therefore, I have called our relationship bilateral and transactional. And that continues.
Yeah.
Despite the fact that the situation in the region is constantly deteriorating, despite the fact that you are at the edge of conflict, despite the fact that we have such crucial interest in the region connected with energy, economy, logistics, and the community, 8.5 million people. I have suggested to you, and you would remember this, that in the first day of conflict in this region, God forbid, if you are going to have a region-wide conflagration, several thousand Indians will be killed.
Yeah.
That's where they live. And if there is a conflict, should not the Indian diplomatic effort have been mounted in this regard, if only for our own interest? That India's crucial long-term interests and the interest of its own community depend entirely on maintaining stability. So I have found that India is no longer, has not been interested seriously. Its priorities, the government's priorities today are nearer at home. It has not taken seriously the relationships with our neighbors. It has not taken really seriously the challenges that we face from different sources. And certainly West Asia figures nowhere at all in terms of its strategic interest. Bilateral relations now have a momentum of their own. They
Yeah.
don't need government. You have reached a certain stage in the relationship, economic cooperation, joint ventures, investments, movement of the community, etc., where government should have played a role. That is the logistical connectivity. We have done nothing. And indeed, that's a signal failure. In 2003, we had agreed with the Iranians that we are going to develop Chabahar.
Yeah.
10 years before Mr. Xi Jinping had announced the Belt and Road Initiative, 10 years earlier. We have made no movement at all, while China is moving very rapidly forward in developing the various infrastructure projects connected with the Belt and Road. So we have had opportunities in the past. We have had, but the absence of a vision, the absence of a strategy, and the absence of a stamina and the enthusiasm that really sees you through has been entirely missing. And today it is of no relevance. Do recall here, Surya, that in the meantime, other countries have not been fast asleep.
Yeah.
Russia and China have both become major role players in the region. They are working overtime for a regional scenario that will be consolidated after the pandemic. We are told by the pundits, foreign policy pundits, that the pandemic is not creating new realities, it is accelerating existing developments. The existing developments were there, the Sino-Russian nexus and their ties with Iran. But the pandemic has accelerated it. You are aware today that both Russia and China are separately, robustly engaging with Iran. And if Pakistan is brought into the equation, you are looking at a solid landmass at the Indian borders, northern and western borders, which are linking with themselves with each other and developing a new strategic reality at our doorstep. While we have been focused for so long on the Quad and imagining that we are threatened in the Indian Ocean, where we are not, we have unnecessarily associated ourselves with this bogus concept of the Indo-Pacific. Americans have a problem with the Chinese in the South China Sea. India does not. India's interests are in the Indian Ocean. This is where, but we have got ourselves into this Quad. Our challenges, our immediate challenges are land-based. And that is where the changes are taking place, right in front of our eyes. You have read about the discussions going on between China and Iran, which have political, military, economic, and energy-related content over a longer period of time. You are aware of the China-Pakistan engagement under CPEC. You are aware of the role that Russia is increasingly playing in Afghanistan, in Syria, in Iraq, in Afghanistan, and also with the Arab Gulf countries. I imagine that there are other role players that I had envisaged India would be at the center of these initiatives. I find that my leadership and my country are today innocent bystanders.
Perhaps our focus is elsewhere, maybe on China. But
our focus is entirely on domestic issues and reworking of the domestic scenario and the domestic political order. China is something that happened recently. It was not an issue before us at all. It is because I would call it a very harsh reminder to India of where geographically it is located. We took our eye off. By fooling around in the Indian Ocean, we took our eye off and we have allowed this crisis to develop. It will be addressed. And I believe that through patience, it will be addressed. I don't think it is also emphasized to us the urgent need to address the border issue, to demarcate the border. Wherever you have borders that are undemarcated, anywhere in the world, you have problems because you don't know who has encroached on what, and you don't know who to blame, who took the initiative, etc. I think it will be addressed. The focus is a larger problem, Surya. The larger problem very clearly is you must have a vision. For all this, I'm going to use a big cliche, strategic culture. India has denied itself the shaping of a strategic culture. A strategic culture involves a vision, a strategy, and an action plan. We survived through the 20th century largely due to the Cold War, and we had the non-aligned movement, etc. The 20th, 21st century is a century where changes are taking place. Crucial changes are taking place. And we cannot no any longer live on the ballast of the 20th century. We have to develop a new strategic culture that will equip us. For this, there is a fundamental point to be made. You have to take foreign affairs seriously. I don't see evidence of that. You must, the kind of robust attention that the government is now putting in favor of domestic issues and the reshaping of the domestic scenario in terms of the idea of India and the political values of India, etc. That energy, that vision, that drive, that enthusiasm is entirely missing with regard to foreign affairs.
As always, Ambassador Talmiz, you bring a unique perspective grounded in very hard realities. Thank you very much for your perspective, and good to hear you. Hopefully, India will get its act together at some point. Thank you.